The warning, the year was 2187, and humanity had learned to walk among the stars with careful steps. The Terran Federation stretched across 43 star systems, each colony a testament to human determination and ingenuity. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Harmony, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace through the main viewport. Her mission was simple in concept but complex in execution. Establish formal relations with the Nigma Empire, a powerful alien civilization that controlled nearly 200 systems in the Kepler sector. Sarah had spent the past 3 months studying everything known about the Nigma Empire. They were an ancient species, having achieved faster-than-light travel over 3,000 years before humans had even discovered fire. Their technology was impressive, their military vast, and their reputation among other alien species was one of absolute dominance. What concerned the Terran Federation most was the Nigma Empire's recent expansion toward human space. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Nigma vessel," announced Lieutenant James Foster from the communications station. His voice carried a hint of nervousness that Sarah understood completely. This was humanity's first direct contact with a truly powerful interstellar empire. "Put it through, Lieutenant," Sarah replied, straightening her diplomatic uniform. She had chosen to wear formal Terran Federation dress blues, hoping to convey both respect and strength. The main screen flickered to life, revealing an alien face that was both fascinating and intimidating. The Nigma representative had features that seemed carved from living stone. Its skin was a deep purple-gray color, with intricate patterns of silver lines running across its face like circuitry. 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern, glowed with an inner light. Most striking was the creature's size. Even sitting, it appeared to tower over the human-sized chair it occupied. "I am High Executor Vexthul of the glorious Nigma Empire," the alien spoke in perfectly translated standard English. Its voice was deep and resonant, carrying overtones that suggested immense age and authority. "You are the representatives of the species called humans, correct?" Sarah stepped forward, positioning herself in full view of the transmission. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation Diplomatic Corps. With me are Ambassador Marcus Rivera, Dr. Elena Vasquez, and General Patricia Hawkins. We come seeking peaceful dialogue between our peoples." High Executor Vexthul made a sound that the translation system interpreted as mild amusement. "Peaceful dialogue. How quaint. Your species is young, Captain Chen. We have been monitoring your expansion for several of your decades. Your technology is primitive, your military force is negligible, and your understanding of galactic politics appears to be non-existent." Ambassador Rivera stepped forward, his years of diplomatic training evident in his calm demeanor. "We may be younger than the Nigma Empire, but we have much to offer. Our scientists have made remarkable breakthroughs in quantum computing, medical, technology, and agricultural systems. We believe in cooperation rather than domination." The High Executor's 4 eyes focused on Rivera with what appeared to be predatory interest. "Cooperation implies equality, Ambassador. The Nigma Empire does not recognize equals among the younger species. We offer protection, guidance, and purpose to those wise enough to accept our benevolent rule." Dr. Elena Vasquez had been quiet during the exchange, but Sarah noticed her taking careful notes on her datapad. As a xenobiologist and cultural analyst, Elena's insights would be crucial for understanding Nigma society. Her expertise in reading alien body language and social cues had already proven invaluable during their preparation for this meeting. "What exactly does Nigma protection entail?" General Hawkins asked, her military background evident in her direct approach. Patricia had commanded Terran Federation forces during the Centauri border conflicts and was not easily intimidated. "Hi, Executor Vexthal's silver facial patterns seemed to shimmer as he replied. Your species would maintain autonomy over daily affairs while surrendering control of military operations, resource extraction, and interstellar relations to Nigma oversight. In return, we provide security from hostile forces and access to certain levels of our technology. The bridge of the harmony fell silent as the implications of this offer became clear. Sarah exchanged glances with her team before responding. We appreciate the offer, High Executor, but humanity values its independence. We seek mutual cooperation, not subjugation. The change in the Nigma leader's demeanor was immediate and chilling. The glow in his four eyes intensified, and his voice took on a harder edge. Your species lacks perspective, Captain Chen. The galaxy is vast and dangerous. Younger civilizations that refuse Nigma protection rarely survive long enough to regret their decision. Ambassador Rivera maintained his diplomatic composure despite the obvious threat. Are you saying that species who refuse your offer face consequences? I am stating a fact of galactic existence, Vexthal replied coldly. The strong survive, the weak perish, and the wise accept their place in the natural order. The Nigma Empire has brought stability to this sector of space for millennia. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her data pad, her expression troubled. High Executor, our researchers have been in contact with several refugee populations from this sector. They tell stories of entire civilizations disappearing after refusing Nigma protection. Can you explain these disappearances? For the first time during the conversation, High Executor Vexthal showed what appeared to be genuine emotion, a flash of anger that made the silver patterns on his face pulse with brighter light. Refugee populations spread lies and propaganda to gain sympathy from naive species like yours. Those civilizations that disappeared, as you put it, either accepted their proper place within our empire or proved too unstable to maintain their societies. General Hawkins leaned forward slightly. And what determines whether a species is too unstable? Continued resistance to natural order, came the reply. Persistent attempts to maintain military forces beyond defensive needs, failure to recognize the authority of superior civilizations, the usual symptoms of a species that has not yet learned its place in the galaxy. The conversation continued for another hour, but it became increasingly clear that the Nigma Empire viewed humanity as just another young species to be absorbed or eliminated. Sarah ended the transmission with diplomatic pleasantries, but everyone on the bridge understood the gravity of the situation. 3 days later, the Harmony returned to Earth orbit. Sarah found herself in the Federation Council chambers, delivering her report to the highest levels of human government. The circular chamber was filled with representatives from every human colony, their faces grave as they listened to the recordings of the Nigma encounter. President Catherine Morrison, a former Starship captain herself, led the discussion. Captain Chen, what is your assessment of Nigma intentions toward humanity? Sarah stood to address the assembly. Based on our interaction and subsequent intelligence gathering, I believe the Nigma Empire views humanity as they view all younger species, as potential subjects to be absorbed into their empire. Their offer of protection is really an ultimatum for surrender, Dr. Vasquez added her analysis. Our research into refugee testimonies suggests a pattern of Nigma behavior spanning centuries. They approach each new species with the same offer. Those who accept become client states with no real autonomy. Those who refuse face escalating pressure until they either surrender or are destroyed. The council chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. Representative Thomas Kim from the Mars colony spoke up. What kind of timeline are we looking at? How long before they make their move? General Hawkins consulted her tactical assessment. Based On historical patterns and current Enigma fleet movements, I estimate we have between 18 months and 3 years before they begin applying serious pressure. They prefer to let younger species worry and weaken themselves through internal debate before taking action. President Morrison called for order. The question before us is simple. Do we prepare for war, or do we seek further diplomatic solutions? Ambassador Rivera, who had remained quiet during most of the briefing, finally spoke. Madam President, I believe we should try one more diplomatic approach, not to seek accommodation, but to make our position absolutely clear. If the Enigma Empire is going to attack humanity, they should understand exactly what they're choosing to fight. The room fell silent as representatives considered this suggestion. Finally, President Morrison nodded. Prepare another diplomatic mission, Ambassador Rivera. Make it clear to the Enigma Empire that humanity will not submit to their rule, but also that we seek no conflict with them. Give them one final chance to reconsider their approach. 6 months later, Ambassador Rivera found himself aboard the heavy cruiser Determination, accompanied by a full diplomatic team and a significant military escort. The message they carried was carefully crafted by the Federation's best diplomatic minds and approved by every human colony. The meeting took place in neutral space at the edge of both human and Enigma territories. This time, the Enigma sent not just High Executive Vexthul, but also Warcast Zarkan, their military commander. The alien military leader was even more imposing than the High Executor, with battle scars crossing his stone-like features and armor that seemed to absorb light. We have returned to deliver humanity's final response to your offer, Ambassador Rivera announced formally. The Terran Federation respectfully declines Enigma protection and requests that you respect our territorial boundaries and sovereignty. High Executive Vexthul's 4 eyes fixed on Rivera with what could only be described as contempt. Your species continues to display remarkable foolishness, Ambassador. Do you truly believe you can stand against the might of the Enigma Empire? We hope it never comes to that, Rivera replied. But if forced to choose between freedom and subjugation, humanity will always choose freedom. We warn you not to mistake our preference for peace as weakness. We are prepared to defend ourselves. Warcast Zarkan spoke for the first time, his voice like grinding stone. Your entire species possesses fewer than 200 warships. The Enigma Empire commands over 50,000 vessels of war. Your defensive preparations are laughable. Rivera maintained his composure. Numbers don't tell the whole story, Warcast. Humanity has faced extinction before and survived through determination and ingenuity. We survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and the challenges of space colonization. We don't back down from threats. Then you have chosen extinction. High Executive Vexthul declared, the Enigma Empire will not tolerate defiance from primitive species. You will submit or you will be eliminated. There are no other options. Ambassador Rivera delivered humanity's final message with quiet dignity. Then know this, High Executor Vexthul and Warcast Zarkan. You have been warned. Humanity does not seek war, but we will not be conquered. If you attack us, if you threaten our families and our freedom, you will discover why humans have never remained conquered for long. We warn you, do not mistake our desire for peace as an inability to wage war. The Enigma representatives exchanged what appeared to be amused glances. High Executor Vexthul made a dismissive gesture. Your warnings are noted and disregarded. Ambassador, prepare your species for absorption into the Enigma Empire. Resistance will only make the process more unpleasant. As the transmission ended, Ambassador Rivera felt a weight settle on his shoulders. Humanity had tried diplomacy twice, offering peace and cooperation each time. The Enigma Empire had responded with arrogance and threats. Now there would be war, and despite his diplomatic training, Rivera found himself hoping that humanity was ready for what was coming. The message reached Earth within days, and President Morrison addressed the Federation one final time before the storm. My fellow humans, we have done everything possible to avoid this conflict. We offered friendship, cooperation, and peaceful coexistence. The Nigma Empire has chosen war instead. Now we must prove that humanity's greatest strength has always been our refusal to surrender our freedom to anyone. Across human space, the final preparations began. The Nigma Empire had made their choice, and now humanity would show them the consequences of that decision. The warning had been given. Soon, it would be time for the reckoning. The reckoning 2 years had passed since Ambassador Rivera's final warning to the Nigma Empire. Admiral Jackson Torres stood in the command center of the Terran Federation's most classified facility, buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains on Earth. The massive holographic display before him showed the disposition of every human military asset across 43 star systems. What it didn't show was humanity's greatest secret, the true extent of their preparations for the coming war. "Admiral, we're receiving reports from our deep space monitoring stations," announced Commander Lisa Park, head of strategic intelligence. Her voice was steady, but Torres could see the tension in her shoulders. "Nigma fleet elements are moving toward our border colonies. Long-range sensors indicate at least 3,000 vessels in the initial wave." Torres nodded grimly. For 2 years, humanity had used every day of peace to prepare for this moment. The Nigma Empire believed they were facing a primitive species with fewer than 200 warships. They were about to discover how wrong they were. "Initiate Prometheus Protocol," Torres ordered. "All phases, all systems." Across human space, the command triggered responses that would have seemed impossible just years before. On hidden bases throughout the outer colonies, massive underground facilities opened their concealed hangar doors. Thousands of warships that had been constructed in secret rose from their hiding places, their hulls bearing no identification marks, and their designs unlike anything the Nigma Empire had encountered in their intelligence gathering. Dr. Michael Zhang watched from his laboratory as the first phase of Prometheus came online. For 3 years, he had led a team of the Federation's best scientists in developing technologies that didn't officially exist. Quantum displacement drives that could move a ship across a star system in minutes. Adaptive armor that could reconfigure itself to counter different weapon types. And most importantly, the consciousness-linked targeting systems that allowed human pilots to react with inhuman speed and precision. "How many ships do we actually have, Admiral?" asked Captain Yuki Tanaka. As she entered the command center, the young pilot had been hand-selected to lead humanity's elite starfighter squadrons, and she would soon discover why her training had been so unusually intensive. "Counting everything, including the ships that officially don't exist?" Torres smiled for the first time in weeks. Just over 12,000 vessels of various classes. The Nigma Empire is about to get a very unpleasant surprise. The first Nigma attack came at the Kepler-7 colony, exactly as human intelligence had predicted. Warcast Zarkan personally led the assault force, expecting to crush the human defenders within hours. What he found instead challenged everything. The Nigma Empire believed about warfare. The human defenders didn't meet the Nigma fleet in traditional battle formations. Instead, they used hit-and-run tactics, appearing from seemingly empty space to strike at vulnerable points before vanishing. Again, the Nigma ships, designed for overwhelming firepower and massive fleet engagements, found themselves fighting shadows. Captain Yuki Tanaka led her squadron in a dance of death around the much larger Nigma vessels. Her fighters moved in patterns that seemed to defy physics, their quantum displacement drives allowing them to appear behind enemy ships at the moment their weapons fired. The consciousness-linked targeting systems meant that human pilots could engage multiple targets simultaneously while evading return fire with precision that bordered on precognitive. "This is impossible," Warcast Zarkan growled as he watched. His fleet take casualties from an enemy force that appeared to be one-third their size. Their ships shouldn't be capable of these maneuvers. What Zarkan didn't understand was that humanity had spent 2 years studying every piece of Nigma technology they could acquire. Wreckage from border skirmishes, intercepted communications, and careful intelligence gathering had revealed the strengths and weaknesses of Nigma military doctrine. The aliens were powerful, but they relied on overwhelming force and traditional tactics. They had never faced an enemy that could adapt and improvise as quickly as humans. The battle for Kepler-7 lasted 3 days. When it ended, the Nigma force had been completely destroyed, with only a handful of ships escaping to carry word back to their empire. Human casualties were minimal, fewer than 100 personnel lost, with most ships suffering only minor damage. High Executor Vexthul received the news of the defeat with disbelief that quickly turned to rage. "Impossible. Our intelligence indicated they had limited military capabilities. The humans appear to have been concealing the true extent of their preparations," admitted Subcommander Tethvar, one of the few Nigma officers to survive the battle. "Their technology surpasses our projections by several generations, and their tactical adaptability is unlike anything we've encountered." Vexthul's 4 eyes blazed with fury. "Then we commit more forces. Ready the 2nd and 3rd battle fleets. 15,000 ships should be sufficient to crush these upstart humans, but the humans weren't waiting for the next attack to come to them." Admiral Torres had spent decades studying military history, and he understood that the best defense was often a strong offense. Phase 2 of Prometheus Protocol launched simultaneously across 12 Nigma-controlled systems. Commander Lisa Park led the special operations component of the human offensive. Her teams had spent months infiltrating Nigma space, using stolen ships and false identities to position themselves near critical infrastructure. When the order came, they struck with surgical precision. Nigma communication networks went dark across an entire sector. Their supply chains, which had operated smoothly for centuries, suddenly found themselves under constant attack from forces that appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Most importantly, the humans began liberating the enslaved species that the Nigma Empire had conquered over the millennia. The liberation of the Vaelthir homeworld became a turning point in the war. The Vaelthir had been one of the first species conquered by the Nigma Empire, their advanced biotechnology absorbed into the imperial war machine. When human forces arrived to break their chains, the Vaelthir brought with them detailed knowledge of Nigma military systems and the locations of every important installation in their empire. "We have waited 3,000 years for this day," declared Councillor Yitharan of the Vaelthir Liberation Council. The aliens' crystalline features showed emotions that the Nigma Empire had tried to suppress for millennia. "We will stand with humanity against our former oppressors." The Vaelthir were not alone. Species after species rose up as human forces advanced through Nigma territory. The Kethmaran, master engineers whose technology had built the Nigma fleet. The Zil-Ani, whose mathematical abilities had calculated Nigma hyperspace routes. The Morduk, whose warrior culture had been perverted into Nigma shock troops. All of them had been waiting for someone strong enough to challenge the Empire's rule. Admiral Torres found himself commanding not just human forces, but a coalition of liberated species that grew stronger with each victory. The Nigma Empire, which had maintained control through division and intimidation, suddenly faced a united front of their former victims. The tide of war turned decisively at the Battle of Nexus Prime, the Nigma Empire's most important military staging area. High Executor Vexthul personally commanded the defense, bringing together every available ship in a desperate attempt to stop the human advance. The battle was the largest space engagement in recorded galactic history. Over 30,000 ships from both sides engaged in a conflict that raged across an entire star system. But the outcome was never really in doubt. The Nigma Empire had built their military around intimidation and overwhelming force. When faced with an enemy that refused to be intimidated and could match their force, they had no answers. Captain Yuki Tanaka, now promoted to Admiral of the Fighter Corps, led the final assault on Vexthul's flagship. Her consciousness-linked targeting system allowed her to coordinate attacks from over 1,000 starfighters simultaneously, creating a swarm that moved like a single organism. "For every species you enslaved," she transmitted to the Nigma flagship as her fighters closed in for the killing blow, "for every world you destroyed, for every life you ended in the name of your empire, this is our answer." High Executor. Vexthul's last transmission was a mixture of fury and disbelief. "This cannot be happening. We are the Nigma Empire. We have ruled for 10,000 years. And now your history," Admiral Torres replied from his command ship as the Nigma flagship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The war officially ended 6 months later when human forces entered the Nigma homeworld system. The ancient planet that had been the center of galactic oppression for millennia now faced judgment. But humanity had learned something important during their long struggle for survival. Victory was not about destruction, but about justice. The surviving Nigma leadership stood trial before a tribunal that included representatives from every species they had oppressed. The charges were numerous: genocide, slavery, cultural destruction, and crimes against sapient life, spanning thousands of years. The evidence was overwhelming. Warcast Zarkan, captured during the final battle, showed no remorse as he faced judgment. "You may have won this war, humans, but you are fools if you think you can maintain control over an empire this vast. You lack the will to do what is necessary." Admiral Torres, now serving as military governor of the former Nigma territories, looked at the alien war criminal with something approaching pity. "That's where you're wrong, Zarkan. We're not here to maintain an empire. We're here to make sure this never happens again." The dissolution of the Nigma Empire took 3 years to complete. Rather than absorbing the conquered territories, humanity worked with the liberated species to establish independent governments based on principles of self-determination and mutual cooperation. The Galactic Cooperation Council, headquartered on a neutral world in former Nigma space, became the first truly democratic interstellar government in recorded history. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now serving as humanity's chief xenocultural advisor, observed the transformation with wonder. "In less than 5 years, we've gone from a minor species on the galactic periphery to the founders of a new age of interstellar cooperation. Who could have predicted this?" President Morrison, now in her second term, addressed the Galactic Council as humanity formally joined as an equal member alongside the species they had helped liberate. The Nigma Empire ruled through fear and oppression for 10,000 years. They believed that power came from the ability to dominate others. Today, we begin a new chapter based on the understanding that true power comes from working together toward common goals. The former Nigma homeworld had been transformed into a memorial and museum, a reminder of what could happen when power was concentrated in the hands of those who viewed others as inferior. Visitors from across the galaxy came to see the exhibits detailing the rise and fall of the Empire, but more importantly, to understand the principles that would prevent such tyranny from rising again. Captain Sarah Chen, now promoted to Admiral and serving as humanity's chief diplomatic officer, often stood in the memorial's central hall. The inscription on the wall was simple but powerful. They were warned, they chose war, they discovered that humanity's greatest strength has always been our refusal to accept defeat. As she looked out at the stars through the memorial's observation and dome, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The Nigma Empire had seen humanity as just another young species to be conquered or destroyed. They had ignored the warnings, dismissed human capabilities, and underestimated the power of determination combined with ingenuity. The galaxy was different now. Hundreds of species that had lived under Nigma oppression for millennia were free to develop their own cultures and technologies. Trade routes that had been controlled by imperial decree were now open to all. Scientific knowledge that had been hoarded by the Nigma Empire was shared freely among the member species of the Galactic Cooperation Council. Ambassador Rivera, now serving as the Council's first Secretary General, often reminded his colleagues of the lessons learned from the Nigma War. They had every advantage: superior technology, vast fleets, thousands of years of military experience, but they lacked the one thing that ultimately determined the outcome of this conflict. They didn't understand that the strongest force in the universe is not the desire to dominate, but the determination to remain free. The Nigma Empire had lasted 10,000 years, but it took less than 3 years for humanity and their allies to bring it to an end. The former empire's territories were now home to thriving democracies. Scientific advancement was accelerating across the galaxy, and for the first time in millennia, younger species could develop without fear of conquest. The humans had kept their promise. They had warned the Nigma Empire not to mistake their desire for peace as weakness. When that warning was ignored, they had shown the galaxy that some species should never be underestimated, and that the price of tyranny would always, eventually, come due. In the end, the Nigma Empire learned too late that humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology or their military might, but their absolute refusal to surrender their freedom to anyone. They had been warned. They had chosen war. And now, they no longer existed to threaten anyone ever again.